Welcome back. This is Sandy with Sandy's Organized Chaos, and today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. No glitter involved in this, but we are using sawdust to create this pretty unique look. As always, I'll make sure to put everything that I used today into the description box below, so that way you guys can purchase those items if you would like to. If you're new to my channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and let's wake up, prep these tumblers, and slay all day. Let's do this. I've already prepped and primed my tumbler today. I went ahead and I sprayed it a Smokey Beige, which I'll show you guys here. This is what I used. Of course, you can use any brown you would like, but I'm going to be using this pretty much throughout the whole project. So I just went ahead and painted it that, let that dry. Now the sawdust I'm using, Jeff actually was working on some stuff out in the garage, so I believe this is just pine. So that's what I'm using today. I just picked it right up and I'm using it. Luckily, it had no glitter in it, but I'll make sure to put some places down below. I believe Etsy, you can buy sawdust if you can't get your hands on it, and some other places I do believe sell sawdust just to purchase for projects. I'm going to be using the epoxy method to go ahead and adhere the sawdust to the tumbler. I feel like the epoxy just really helps it soak in and helps us along the line as we go, because you really want to make sure that the sawdust is nice and encapsulated inside of the epoxy. So I have about 5 mLs of epoxy here, and I'm going to apply all 5 mLs all over my tumbler. Now you just want to take your sawdust and just sprinkle it on your tumbler just like you would with your glitter. Now I'm not going to be fully just packing the sawdust onto this tumbler. I'm just going to be very lightly sprinkling it and filling it in the best that I can. The reason why I'm doing it this way is because, again, it's just going to make it more helpful once we start adding coats of epoxy with the sanding and all that. So that way we don't have to add too many coats of epoxy before we get it nice and smooth to be able to do the rest of what we need to do. So once I get over to the handle, I'm really not going to put too much onto my handle. Again, that's going to help out when it comes to epoxying and having to sand it and all that. So I'm just going to very lightly coat the handle with my sawdust as well. Now for the project that I'm doing today, I really didn't even need to sawdust the very bottom of the tumbler, but I went ahead and did it anyways, just for anybody who wanted to completely coat their tumbler, just so you can kind of see what it looks like. But you really didn't need to do the very bottom of the tumbler for this particular project. All right, my sawdust is all applied. Now I'm just going to take my opposite gloved hand and I'm going to start squishing that sawdust down into the epoxy. You're going to notice that that sawdust is going to start to absorb the epoxy. It's going to get kind of like a shiny look to it, and that's perfectly okay. That's what you want. Again, just squish it down as best as you can. And as you see here, I'm really taking my time with that handle and making sure I come through and wipe any big pieces off the outside of that handle, just so that way, again, we don't have any sharp pieces sticking up, and it makes it a little bit more difficult when we go to do the epoxy over top of it. So after I get everything all squished down, I'm just going to let that epoxy cure, and then we're ready to move on to the next step. All right, it's nice and cured and ready to move on to that first coating of epoxy over top of our sawdust. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come through with my gloved hand and really wipe down any big chunks of sawdust that are just sticking out and aren't adhered down. I'm just going to take my gloved hand and just completely rub this down really, really good, removing any of those little bits. All right, it's all brushed off and ready to go. I have 30 mLs of epoxy here. I'm going to use all 30 mLs. Now, some of this wood is still a little bit exposed and some of it's already encased in the first coating of epoxy that we did. But it's going to kind of absorb, the wood's going to absorb the epoxy, which is why we're doing such a large flood coat over top of this. And again, it's going to really help out as we go and apply another coating of epoxy with the sanding and all that. You just want to make sure that you come through and spread this around really, really good. You're going to place that onto your turner. You're going to hit it up with your torch, pop any of those little micro bubbles, and you're going to let that cure. All right, it is nice and cured and ready to start kind of sanding it down and trimming it up and all that. So I'm going to go ahead and take my razor knife. I'm going to make sure that I clean up my rim really good. I just like to do this as I go. It just makes it easier for the ending process, so that way I don't have too much I have to do around the rim. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Then I'm going to take my sanding block and I'm going to start sanding it down. Now we only have 30 mLs over top of this. You just want to be very careful. Now, the great thing about that is it's wood. So, I mean, if you're sanding it, it's really not going to hurt it. So I'm going to come through, I'm going to sand down my rim really good. I'm going to make sure that I get into the handle. The sanding block's great because I could just kind of put it right in between the handle and the main base of the tumbler and just kind of get in there and sand up really good. But again, you don't want to sand to the point where you're getting down to the stainless. You don't want to do that. So just very, very lightly come through, sand any major points down, and get it as smooth as you possibly can without getting back down to that stainless steel base. So by the time you're done, it's still going to be lumpy, a little bit lumpy, but no major points. So after I get done sanding this, I'm going to go ahead and wipe off any of those little materials that might be on there. I'm going to place it back onto my wand. I'm going to put another coating of about 20 mLs of epoxy over top of this. I'm going to let that turn and cure, and then be ready to move on to the next step. So while that cures, I'm going to go ahead and get my decals ready that we're going to be using. Now, some of these I'm going to be using right away and some I won't be using till later on, but I go ahead and cut it all out at once anyways. So for my decal, I didn't want the design that I'm going to be doing on the tumbler to be behind it. So I'm going to be creating a mask to kind of hide where I want my decal to be, so that way that pattern isn't behind it and you can see it a little bit better. So all I did was an offset of my eagle here. I just wanted a little bit of an offset around it, not too much, just a little bit. And I'm going to make up two of those because one's going to be for now and one's going to be for later. And I'm going to go ahead and do up my trees as well. So I just chose a basic tree design. It's very simple. There's not a lot of little things going on in it. And I went ahead and I measured around my tumbler where I want it to be. I kind of wanted mine up more on the base. So it was about 11.5 around. So I'm just going to make sure that I line my trees up till it gets about 11.5. Now I wanted mine a little bit bigger, so these are about 4, almost 4.5 in height. So that's about what I did for my sizing for this. Now, once you finally have enough trees to where it's going to fit completely around your tumbler, you're just going to want to stagger the line here. You don't want it all in a row. You just want some up, some down. Very, very simple. That's all you want to do for that. And then after you do that, you're going to highlight all your trees. You're going to go down and press the weld button, and you're going to weld everything together. The reason why we weld everything together is because it will be all one unanimous piece without any extra little cuts where you don't want them. It's going to be all one template. So I'm going to cut the two outlines and the trees out on the same semi-permanent vinyl, so that way it's easy to peel up. And then the eagle decal, I'm going to use my black vinyl to cut that out on. And I also cut out some basic stars right in the shape section there at 0.5. I just very small stars. That's all you want to do. All right, our decals are ready to go, and I'm going to go ahead and get my lid back onto my tumbler. This has a screw top lid, and I'm going to use that to my advantage to figure out where I want my decal to go. So I went ahead and screwed that on, and now I'm going to lay down our first mask that we did. Now, if you didn't want to add a decal on like I'm doing, obviously you don't have to do this part, but if you did want to add a decal and you do want to do this is what you want to do. You want to add this first before we do anything else. You want this on the very bottom so that way it is nice and covered up. So to get started on this flag look, the first thing I want to do is take some 1-inch painter's tape, and we're going to block off the blue area first where the stars will be. Now, to make sure that each side is going to be equal right outside of the handle, because I wanted the blue part to be right outside the handle, I'm going to lay my tape over the top of my tumbler, right over the top, as you've seen there. And I'm just going to pull it straight down. And then I'm going to take some scissors and just kind of snip the top off so that way I can get that line right there nice and straight. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, where I take my tape and I pull it down nice and straight, and then I'm just going to make a little slit at the top so that way I can get it all nice and smooth against my tumbler here to start up our template. Now, after I have this all smoothed down, you'll be able to see that it has equal portions on each side of the handle for us now. Now we're going to go ahead and finish up the square right off the bottom of our handle. I'm just going to take some more painter's tape and just line it up right underneath my handle, just making a nice square shape. Now, after I get this all blocked in, I'm going to take my little stars and I'm just going to fill up the inside of my blue area right inside of that green green square that we made with our tape, I'm just going to completely fill that in with my star shapes, and not being too worried if I go over that eagle decal that we laid down, not being worried about that. It'll be just fine. And I even kind of staggered them off into the tape as well, just kind of give it more of a unique look of it looking like stained wood. So like I just mentioned, I really wanted this to have the sawdust look to have kind of this stained look to it, so you could still see the sawdust under it. So we're gonna come through after I get my stars applied. I'm even going up on top of the handle, everything, you know. I'm gonna come through and we're going to start painting it up with some alcohol inks. So after your stars are applied, you just really want to come through and verify that all these little edges are nice and stuck down to your tumbler, so that way these inks don't get up under there. If it does, you can just come through with a Q-tip and kind of clean it up. Not a big deal. So I was playing around with some alcohol inks and I was trying to figure out which I wanted to use because I had 3 different blues. But I know sometimes these blues can look more green, and I didn't want that. I really wanted to make sure that it had a nice blue color to it. So I'm just going to take my blues, put it onto my rag, and figure out which one I want to use. So I thought that one had a little too much green to it, so I went ahead and moved on to the next one. And this one, it was okay, but there was still kind of a hint of green to it. And like I said, I didn't want that. So I went ahead and I'm just going to be using this blue right here. I'll make sure I put it into the description box, but it had a really nice color to it. And I did the same thing with my reds as well, because you can add, you know, you don't want a pink, you want red, right? So, and we're doing a flag look and we want it to be a nice blue and a nice red. So I'm just going to take my inks right onto my rag here, and I'm just going to dab this coloring around until I get it the color that I would like. So obviously we're doing a red, white, and blue theme here. So the reason why we masked off the areas that the sawdust is going to be our white. So when we pull that back, that will be what the white is supposed to be. But I really like how the inks are just so translucent, and it really does look like stained wood. And as you can see, I'm really making sure that I get up underneath that handle, making sure that it is all completely blue in that area that I want to be blue. Now, after I'm all done, I'm going to go ahead and remove the stars and the tape. I'm not going to remove the eagle decal, where my eagle decal will be, because we're going to come through and we still have another staining that we have to do. But for my new friends that have never worked with alcohol inks before, they pretty much dry right after you apply them. So it's okay to come through and touch it and peel all your little stuff back. So I'm going to go ahead and do that really quick. And this is what we are left with. So I still have my eagle decal down there, and that is what we have so far. All right, so this next part, we're going to start doing these stripes, and I'm going to take that same 1-inch painter's tape, and I'm going to start applying that in stripes all the way around my tumbler here. As you can see, I'm just taking one piece, lining it up right underneath the next, and going all the way down to the bottom. Now, once I get my tape down to where the handle part is, it's pretty simple. You're just going to come through, and once that gets wrapped around, you're going to take your X-Acto knife and just kind of trim and place that tape underneath, making sure that it's as straight as possible, still in line, making sure that it's going to be a nice straight stripe for you. So I'm just going to do that really quick. And then once I get down below this piece, it's where it starts to curve a little bit. And again, I didn't really know how far down my trees were going to go, so I'm just going to treat it like I'm not applying the trees and just put my stripes all the way down to the bottom, just to make sure that when we go to apply the trees, that all that coloring is as far down as it needs to be. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up applying these stripes here. Now, once it gets to that curve, like I was talking about, I'm just going to do the very top of it, and then I'm going to come through and push it all down. So I made sure the top was nice and straight, and then just came through and squished the bottom down, so that way I had a nice straight line for us to finish this up. Now, once you get your template all applied, you're going to go ahead and remove every other piece of tape. So I'm going to skip that bottom piece of tape, and I'm going to go one up from that, and I'm just going to again skip over every other piece of tape, making our stripe template. Now you may be wondering why I went ahead and taped it up the way that I did. I just find that my lines are a lot straighter when I go ahead and just fully do up a template like this, rather than using a little piece as a guide. I just find it goes a little bit better for the evenness of my stripes. All right, once our template is all done here, we're just going to come through and tape up along the blue, just so that way our red doesn't leak up onto our blue. So I'm just going to take some of that tape I just peeled back and kind of block off that blue area for us. And this is what it should look like. So we have our stripes and our blue area is all blocked off. All right, now we're gonna go ahead and do the same thing. I'm just gonna take that same rag and I'm gonna take my red. I think I'm using Crimson by Tim Holtz, and we're gonna go ahead and stain our stripes this red color. Now, if you wanted a little bit more of a deeper color, you could come through maybe with some of your teakwood, the brown color that we're going to be using for the trees, and kind of rub that in here and there as well. You just want to make sure you fill this in so it doesn't look pink. You want it a nice red color. So I'm just going to go ahead and give this that stained look. Now, after I get it all stained up, I'm going to go ahead and remove my tape and where my decal will be. So I'm going to go ahead and remove everything off of the tumbler that doesn't need to be on it. And this is what we were left with. You can see where my decal is going to go. We have a nice flag look going on here, and it is ready to get this finished up. But now that we've already done all the sawdust and everything, every coat of epoxy I give it after this is going to be a thinner coating of epoxy, just so that way this doesn't get too heavy on us. So I'm going to go ahead and put it back on its wand. I'm going to spray it with my 2x Ultra Clear. You can do that, or you can let your ink sit overnight. You definitely need something over it so that way your inks don't dissipate under the epoxy. I'm going to give it a coating of about 10 to 15 mLs of epoxy. Let that cure, and we'll be ready to move on to the next step. So typically we want to use the trees on the inside, but we don't want to use that. We want to use the outside of our template today. So I went ahead and I removed the trees. You can save those for another project at another time. And I'm going to go ahead and cut off the bottom because we don't need that part. And I'm going to trim up the sides really good, just so that way I know it's going to fit around my tumbler. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my other little eagle outline, because we did up 2 masking of our eagles here, and I'm going to apply that first. Again, you always want to apply that first before you do anything else over top of it. And then we're going to be ready to start putting our trees on. Now, after I have the transfer tape over top of my trees here, I'm going to go ahead and make slits right up the center of our trees here. This is just going to really help out when we go to stick it down to the curves of our tumbler. So I'm just going to come through and do a slit right in between each tree. Now I'm going to go ahead and peel back my paper backing, and we're going to start rolling this onto the tumbler. Now I'm going to start at my handle, and I'm just going to line that up the best that I can. I kind of use the stripes to my advantage, and you just want to come up as far as you want to as well. I wanted mine kind of more, and I want my trees to come up over into the middle of the tumbler. And again, I'm just going to focus on the top of my trees, pushing that down, and I will focus on the bottom of the trees here in a minute. Now, once I get to this handle, I'm just going to take my scissors and make a slit on each side here. And I'm just going to make sure that I press that down really good. And I'm also going to kind of stretch it. You'll see here in a second. I'm going to take it and I'm just going to stretch it over and make sure it fits right around my handle, and making sure it's all nice and closed in. Now I'm going to take each one of those tabs and just firmly press down around the curve of that tumbler there, making sure that everything is nice and pressed down firmly onto the tumbler before I spray paint. Now, after our trees are applied, we're going to go ahead and tape off anything we don't want to have spray paint put on it. So I don't want my handle to have spray paint, or the top portion of my tumbler to have spray paint on it. So I'm just going to kind of block all that stuff off, making sure I don't accidentally get any little overspray on anything where I don't want it. And after it's all blocked off, this is pretty much what it looks like. And now it's ready to go outside and give it a coating of spray paint. Now again, I'm going to use the same spray paint that I used for my base. I'm just going to use that Smokey Beige, or you could use any type of brown. You could use white. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to go ahead and give it a spray painting of that. I'm going to let that dry up really good, and we're going to start on our wood look. So I have a 2-inch chip brush. I've used this brush for the last 4 years. It's my go-to brush. As you see, it has a nice buildup on it. It works great. And I also have some teakwood alcohol ink, and that's basically what we're going to be using to give us that wood look. So here is my tumbler. I still have all my templates on there. You want to keep those on there so that way we can paint up everything really good. And we're going to get this going. So for this wood look, you're just going to do a stripe of your ink straight down, and you're just going to take your chip brush and sweep it back and forth in a straight line. And you're going to take another stripe and do it right up against that first line that we did. You want to make sure that it's as close as possible as you go around. So you're going to kind of see every time I go, the stripe of ink is right up next to the other stripe of my ink that I did earlier, and just swishing it around with that up and down motion. And that's pretty much all you want to do to get a wood look. Wood looks are so extremely easy. Now, I'm not too worried about the bottom because I have a special thing that I like to do, and I'll show you guys how I do it. But I am making sure that I do get that ink up onto the bottom as well, just so that way it's nice and filled in. And then after you get it all filled in with this wood look, you can come back through and kind of touch up any little spots that might not look right to you. They look like too much like brush strokes rather than wood. So you just come through and do little dabs and do your same up and down motion to fill all that stuff in. And that's pretty much what you have so far. Now we're gonna go ahead and do up this bottom. So for the bottom, I'm just going to take a paper towel. I'm going to take the tiniest amount of rubbing alcohol, and I'm going to start right in the center of my bottom and swirl around. So you just want it to come out as far as you want, but you want it to look like the bottom of a log. That's pretty much all you want to do. And you want to go until you kind of get the look that you want. So I want it a little bit lighter, so I'm going to take a clean portion of my paper towel and again do the same process where I just go around in a circle and give it that kind of log look to it. And that's what I have. But I've been doing this for years and my customers have always really enjoyed the finishing look to my wood look. So now we're gonna go ahead and peel all of our stuff back. And you just want to be extra careful with any little pieces that you need to get out of there. I just take a knife and just really make sure that I'm very careful when I come through so I don't accidentally nick the wood look that I just did. And now I'm going to come through, and if any of that brown kind of seeped up under there, again, I'm just going to take an extremely small amount of rubbing alcohol and just kind of clean up any little spots that might have accidentally seeped up under. Now, because our decals go in straight onto the epoxied surface, I'm going to go ahead and apply my decal. I'm going to go ahead and get its last two finishing coats of epoxy applied, and this will be ready to go. Whether you take this design and duplicate it as is, or you take it and let it inspire you to create something that is completely your own, I hope that you guys had a lot of fun watching this tutorial today. Again, if you're new to my channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and I will see you guys next time.